The corridors of Kepler station hummed with the endless drone of life support systems, a mechanical lullaby that had become the soundtrack to Jace Cross's existence. At 17, he had spent 3 years walking these sterile halls, watching his boots echo against polished metal floors while other teenagers clustered in groups he was never invited to join. His parents meant well, he supposed. Commander Helena Cross ran the station's military operations with the precision of a chronometer, while Chief Engineer David Cross kept the massive structure functioning in the cold depths of space. They loved him in their distant, duty-bound way, quick hugs between shifts, proud smiles during the rare family dinners when neither was called away for emergencies. But love and belonging weren't the same thing, and Jace had learned the difference the hard way. The other teens on the station saw him as the commander's son, too afraid to befriend him or too resentful of his status to try. So he wandered. The station was vast, with entire sections sealed off for various reasons: construction, radiation leaks, or simply areas deemed non-essential. His parents assumed he spent his free time in the rec centers or studying. They never asked where he really went. Today's exploration had led him deeper into the medical wing than ever before. Past the general clinic where colonists received routine care, beyond the surgical suites, into a restricted area marked with warning signs and biometric locks. But Jace had learned that his genetic clearance, inherited from his mother's command codes, opened more doors than anyone realized. The hallway here was quieter, almost reverent. Soft blue lighting replaced the harsh white of the main corridors, and the air carried a faint scent of ozone and sterilization compounds. He passed empty rooms filled with equipment he didn't recognize: tanks, monitoring devices, atmospheric processors. Then he saw her. Through a reinforced window, in a room that looked more like a cell than a medical bay, a figure lay on what appeared to be a modified bed. Jace stopped, his breath catching. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen, humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin was a pale purple, almost lavender in the room's gentle lighting, and dark curls framed a face that was both alien and achingly beautiful. But what struck him most was her stillness. She lay propped against pillows, her upper body visible above white sheets, but something was wrong with her proportions. Where her legs should have been, the blanket lay flat against the bed. Jace pressed closer to the window, and as if sensing his presence, her eyes opened. They were large, dark pools that seemed to hold depths he couldn't fathom. For a moment, they stared at each other through the barrier of glass and species, two isolated souls recognizing something familiar in the other. She lifted one hand, graceful fingers with subtle webbing between them, and placed it against the window. Without thinking, Jace mirrored the gesture, his palm meeting hers with only the cold glass between them. Her mouth moved, forming words he couldn't hear or understand, but her expression was clear: loneliness. It radiated from her like heat from a star, and Jace felt his own chest tighten in recognition. "Who are you?" he whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. As if in answer, she pulled her hand away and reached for something beside her bed, a small tablet. With quick, practiced movements, she began to draw. When she turned the screen toward the window, Jace saw a simple sketch: waves, flowing lines that suggested water, movement, life. Then she pointed to herself. An aquatic species. That explained the webbed fingers, the modified bed, the strange proportions. And if she was aquatic? Jace looked around the sterile, dry room with new eyes. No water. No moisture. No way for her to move naturally. She was as trapped here as he was trapped in his isolation, but her prison was physical as well as emotional. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made him step back from the window. A medical technician rounded the corner, and Jace quickly moved away, his heart pounding. But as he walked back toward the main sections of the station, his mind remained fixed on those dark eyes and the desperate loneliness he'd seen there. For the first time in years, Jace had found someone who understood what it meant to be alone. And for the first time in his life, he had someone he wanted to help. He would come back. Whatever else happened, he would come back. The corridors of Kepler station still hummed with their mechanical song, but now Jace heard something different in the sound: possibility. Jace returned the next day with a soft towel he'd stolen from the luxury quarters and a portable speaker loaded with ocean sounds he'd found in the station's archives. The biometric lock still recognized his clearance, and his heart raced as he approached her room. She was awake, propped against pillows, staring at the ceiling with those impossibly deep eyes. When she noticed him at the window, her face transformed, surprise melting into something that might have been relief. The door controls were more complex, but after several tense minutes, Jace managed to override them. The soft hiss of the opening door made her turn fully toward him, and he got his first clear look at her condition. Her torso was elegantly formed, but where her legs should have been, her body tapered into what appeared to be a sleek, muscular tail adapted for swimming, beautiful and utterly useless on dry land. "Hi," he said softly, then felt foolish. She obviously couldn't understand him. But she smiled, the first genuine expression of joy he'd seen from anyone in months, and gestured for him to come closer. Up close, her pale purple skin had an almost luminescent quality, and her dark curls framed a face that was both alien and achingly familiar in its expressions. Jace offered her the towel, and she accepted it with reverence, pressing the soft fabric against her cheek. Her eyes closed in what was clearly pleasure at the texture. Then he activated the speaker, and the sound of gentle waves filled the sterile room. Her reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. Tears, actual tears that looked remarkably human, began flowing down her cheeks as she listened to the sounds of home. She reached out and grasped Jace's hand, squeezing with surprising strength while making soft sounds in her throat that might have been words or simply expressions of gratitude. Over the following days, Jace established a routine. Early morning visits before the station fully awakened, bringing small gifts and spending time learning to communicate. She drew constantly, sketches that told the story of her people, the Telesari. Underwater cities with flowing architecture, research vessels exploring the cosmos, and then the darker images, explosions, debris, death. Through her art, he learned her name, Rena. She pointed to herself repeatedly while making a sound that he eventually learned to pronounce correctly. In return, he taught her, Jace, watching her struggle with the unfamiliar consonants. Jace, she would say, her accent making it sound like music. Jace, good. The breakthrough came when he brought technical manuals and scrap components from his father's workshop. Rena's eyes lit up as she examined the anti-grav generators and mobility servos. Her drawings became more complex, engineering diagrams that Jace gradually understood were plans for a hover rig. Working together, they began to build. Rena's knowledge of advanced physics combined with Jace's access to materials and basic engineering skills. She would sketch modifications while he assembled components, their hands often touching as they worked, sending electricity through his nervous system. The first successful test was magical. The hover platform lifted Rena 3 feet off the ground, and for the first time since he'd known her, she moved freely through space. Her laughter was like water over stones, pure joy that filled the sterile room with life. "Free," she said in carefully practiced English, then added something in her own language that sounded like a prayer. That night, Jace helped her navigate the corridors during the quiet hours, the hover rig humming softly as they explored sections of the station she'd never seen. When they reached an observation deck, Rena pressed against the viewport, staring at the stars with an expression of wonder and longing. "Home," she whispered, touching the glass. "Far. You're not alone anymore," Jace told her, meaning it with every fiber of his being. She turned to him, those dark eyes holding depths he was only beginning to explore, and placed her webbed hand over his heart. "Jace," she said softly. "Not alone." In that moment, floating together among the stars, they both found something they'd thought was lost forever, belonging. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Jace found himself thinking about Rena during every waking moment. Her laughter echoed in his mind during family dinners, her graceful movements haunted his dreams, and the way she said his name had become his favorite sound in the universe. Their communication had evolved beyond basic words and drawings. They developed their own language of gestures and expressions, understanding each other with the intuitive connection that transcended species. When Rena grew frustrated with the limitations of the hover rig, Jace knew without words. When he felt overwhelmed by his parents' distant expectations, she sensed his mood the moment he entered her room. "Today, we go far," she announced during one of his visits, her English improving daily. She'd been practicing with old learning programs he'd smuggled to her. Jace helped her onto the hover rig, their hands lingering as he adjusted the controls. Every casual touch sent warmth racing through his body, and he'd begun to notice the way her eyes followed his movements, how she leaned closer when he spoke. They ventured into the abandoned botanical section, a vast area meant to house plants for the colony that had never been completed. Empty growing chambers stretched into shadows, but large viewports offered spectacular views of the nebula surrounding their system. "Beautiful," Rena breathed, maneuvering her hover rig closer to the massive windows. The purple and gold clouds of stellar gas painted her skin in shifting hues, making her look even more ethereal. "Yes," Jace agreed, but he wasn't looking at the nebula. She caught his gaze and smiled, that radiant expression that made his heart skip. "You look at me, not stars." Heat flooded his cheeks. "Sorry, I—" "Good," she interrupted, reaching for his hand. "I look at you same way." The admission hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Jace felt the moment's significance, the shift from friendship into something deeper and more profound. "Rena," he whispered, stepping closer. The hover rig brought her to almost his height, their faces inches apart. "In my people's way," she said softly, "when hearts connect, we share water song. But I have no water here." Her webbed fingers traced the line of his jaw. "So I share this instead." She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, and Jace felt his entire world reorganize around that single point of contact. Her kiss was gentle but certain, flavored with the strange sweetness of her alien biology. When they parted, both were breathing hard. Is this okay?" Jace asked, suddenly aware of how little he knew about her people's customs. "I don't want to." "More than okay," she assured him, pulling him closer. "Is beautiful. You are beautiful." Over the following days, their relationship blossomed into something that felt both inevitable and miraculous. Jace would carry her sometimes when the hover rig's power cells needed charging, her arms around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder. The trust implicit in these moments moved him deeply, this incredible being who had survived the destruction of everything she knew, choosing to be vulnerable with him. Their first truly intimate moment came during a quiet evening in her room. Rena had been sketching while Jace read aloud from an old collection of Earth poetry. The words seemed to transport her. She would close her eyes and sway slightly, as if the rhythm reminded her of underwater currents. "Your voice is like deep water songs," she told him, setting aside her tablet. "Makes me feel safe." "You make me feel everything," Jace admitted. "Before you, I felt like I was sleepwalking through life." She reached for him, pulling him down beside her on the modified bed. In the gentle blue lighting, her skin seemed to glow as she traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "Show me more of your world," she whispered. "Show me how humans love." What followed was tender and exploring, a careful discovery of how their different biologies could create harmony. Rena's skin was silky and slightly cool, her movements fluid even constrained by the bed. When she gasped his name during their most intimate moments, it sounded like water singing over stones. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest while he ran his fingers through her dark curls. "My people believed," she said quietly, "that souls recognize each other across any distance, any difference. I never understood until now." "I love you," Jace said, the words coming from somewhere deep and certain. "I know it's crazy, but—" "Not crazy," she interrupted, pressing a kiss over his heart. "Is destiny. Even if stars burn out, even if everything changes, this is real." As they held each other in the quiet hours before dawn, both knew they had found something rare and precious. Neither spoke of the future or the impossibility of their situation. For now, it was enough to exist in this bubble of perfect understanding, two lonely souls who had found their home in each other's arms. The end of their secret world came with the soft chime of an incoming message on Jace's personal communicator. He was lying beside Rena in her room, watching her sketch the sunset they'd witnessed from the observation deck the night before, when the device buzzed insistently. Jace Cross, report to Administrator Kane's office immediately. The blood drained from his face. Kane was the station's civilian administrator, a cold, bureaucratic man who viewed everything in terms of regulations and efficiency. Rena noticed his expression and set down her tablet. "What is wrong?" she asked, her English now fluent enough to capture subtle emotions. I think we've been discovered." The walk to Kane's office felt like a march to execution. The administrator's suite occupied a prime location with panoramic views of space, designed to intimidate visitors with its austere luxury. Kane himself was a thin man with gray hair and pale eyes that seemed to catalog every detail for future use. "Sit down, Mr. Cross," Kane said without preamble. Behind him stood Dr. Amira Vasquez, the station's xenobiologist, a woman Jace had seen occasionally but never spoken to. Her expression was carefully neutral. "It has come to my attention," Kane continued, "that you've been accessing restricted areas without authorization. Specifically, the quarantine wing of the medical bay." Jace's mouth went dry. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can. What's more concerning is that you've been interfering with a valuable research specimen. The Telisari survivor represents an unprecedented opportunity for xenobiological study. Her species' unique adaptations, their advanced biotechnology." "She's not a specimen," Jace interrupted, anger overriding fear. "She's a person. Her name is Rena, and she's—" "What she is," Kane cut him off, "is an alien of unknown capabilities who has somehow formed an attachment to a minor under my jurisdiction. Dr. Vasquez has expressed concerns about potential psychological manipulation." Jace turned to the xenobiologist in shock. "You think she's manipulating me?" Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her expression sympathetic but professional. "Jace, we don't fully understand Telisari neurology. Some aquatic species have sophisticated chemical communication methods. It's possible you're being influenced in ways you can't perceive." "That's ridiculous." Jace stood, hands clenched. "You've never even talked to her. If you had, you'd know." "What I know," Kane interrupted, "is that this situation ends now. I've arranged for the specimen to be transferred to Research Facility Titan 7. They have proper aquatic environments and specialists who can conduct thorough studies." The words hit Jace like a physical blow. Titan 7 was notorious among the colonies, a research installation where alien artifacts and biological samples disappeared into classified studies that lasted decades. If Rena went there, he would never see her again. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I can and I will. The transfer ship arrives in 72 hours. Kane's expression softened slightly. "Son, I understand this seems harsh, but you're 17 years old. These feelings you think you have, they'll pass. In time, you'll thank me." Jace left the office in a daze, his mind reeling with the implications. 72 hours. 3 days to figure out something, anything, that might save the only person who had ever truly understood him. He found his parents in their shared quarters, reviewing duty rosters over dinner. When he told them what had happened, their reactions were depressingly predictable. "Jace, sweetheart," his mother said carefully, "maybe this is for the best. You've been so isolated lately, and if this creature has been influencing you." "She hasn't been influencing me." Jace exploded. "God, why does everyone assume that? Maybe I'm different around her because she actually listens to me. Maybe I'm happier because someone finally sees me as more than just your son or a duty to be managed." His father set down his tablet. "That's not fair, Jace. We love you. You love your idea of me," Jace shot back. The quiet, obedient son who doesn't cause problems. But you don't know me. You've never asked what I want or how I feel or what makes me happy. She does. The argument continued for hours, but Jace could see the conflict in his parents' eyes. They genuinely believed they were protecting him, which somehow made it worse. At least Kane's coldness was honest. When he finally escaped to Reena's room, he found her floating in her hover rig by the window, staring out at the stars. She turned as he entered, and her expression told him she already knew. "They told you," she said quietly. "Reena, I'm going to find a way to stop this. I'll talk to the Colony Council, or... No." She maneuvered closer, taking his hands in hers. "You cannot fight this with words. Your people fear what they do not understand. Then what do we do?" Her dark eyes held depths of sadness but also something else, determination. "We show them that love is stronger than fear. But first, you must choose." "Choose what?" "To be brave," she said simply. "All your life, you hide from conflict. You let others decide for you. But now you must decide, will you let them take me, or will you finally fight for something that matters?" Jace looked into her eyes and saw his own reflection, not the quiet, invisible boy he'd always been, but someone who could be more. Someone who could stand up and fight for love. "I'll fight," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Reena smiled, the expression both heartbreaking and fierce. "Then we begin." Outside the window, the stars burned with cold fire, indifferent to the small human drama playing out in their shadows. But for the first time in his life, Jace Cross was ready to burn just as brightly. The colony's main assembly hall hadn't seen a gathering this large in years. Word had spread quickly through the station's communication networks. The commander's son was challenging Administrator Kane's decision about the alien specimen. What most people didn't expect was the composed 17-year-old who stood before the Colony Council, his voice steady as he addressed the room. 3 days ago, Administrator Kane told me that what I feel for Reena isn't real," Jace began, his hand surprisingly steady as he activated the holographic display he prepared. "He suggested that I'm being manipulated by alien psychology. I'm here to prove him wrong." Behind him, images filled the air, Reena's artwork, technical diagrams, linguistic analyses, and video recordings of their interactions that Jace had carefully compiled over the past 72 hours. "These are Reena's technical drawings," he continued, gesturing to complex schematics. "She designed improvements to our atmospheric recycling systems that could increase efficiency by 30%. These linguistic patterns show the complexity of telesari communication, not manipulation, but sophisticated artistic expression. And these medical scans." Dr. Vasquez shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Jace displayed brain activity charts. Dr. Vasquez suggested that Reena might be using chemical influence. "But these scans, taken with her permission, show that her neurochemistry remains completely stable during our interactions. No pheromone production, no psychoactive compounds. The only thing influencing me is the fact that she treats me like a person worth knowing." Kane stood from the council table. "This is all very impressive, Mr. Cross, but it doesn't change the fundamental issue. The specimen." "Her name is Reena," Jace interrupted, his voice carrying a new authority that surprised everyone, including himself. "And she's not a specimen. She's a refugee who survived the destruction of her entire civilization. She deserves the same rights and protections we'd give any other sentient being." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as Jace activated another file. 2 days ago, I contacted the Galactic Refugee Commission. They confirmed that under Colonial Treaty 847, any surviving member of a destroyed civilization has the right to asylum and self-determination. Reena cannot be transferred against her will. Kane's face darkened. "That treaty applies to humanoid species. The legal status of..." "Actually," Dr. Vasquez interrupted, rising from her seat, "it applies to any being demonstrating complex cognition and cultural development." She looked directly at Jace, something like respect in her eyes. I've reviewed Mr. Cross's documentation. The linguistic complexity alone proves sapience equivalent to human standards. The hall erupted in surprised whispers. Kane turned to the xenobiologist with obvious anger. Dr. Vasquez, need I remind you that your department receives significant funding for research projects? And need I remind you, she replied coolly, that ethical violations could result in the loss of our Colonial Science Commission accreditation? The data is clear, this young woman is not a specimen to be studied but a person to be protected. Another voice joined the debate as engineer Cale Morrison stood from the gallery. I've worked with Jace on some of the technical modifications for the mobility rig. The alien, Rena, her engineering knowledge is extraordinary. She could contribute significantly to our colony's development if given the chance. The tide was turning, and Jace felt it. But the moment that sealed their victory came when the assembly hall doors opened and Rena herself entered, her hover rig humming softly as she navigated toward the front of the room. I request to speak, she announced in clear, carefully pronounced English. Kane tried to object, but colony charter law was clear about the rights of refugees to address their own cases. Rena positioned herself beside Jace, her presence both regal and vulnerable. My people believe that understanding comes through sharing stories, she began, her accent lending musical quality to her words. I will tell you mine, and you will understand why I choose to stay. What followed was poetry and heartbreak woven together. Rena spoke of Telasari culture, their underwater cities that sang with living architecture, their philosophy of harmony between technology and nature. She described the attack that destroyed her research vessel, the weeks alone in an escape pod, the despair of being the last of her kind. When I came here, I was already dead inside, she said, her eyes finding Jace in the crowd. Your doctors healed my body, but I had no hope, no purpose, no future. Then one person showed me kindness without wanting anything in return. He gave me back my life. She turned to address the council directly. You fear what you do not understand. But I am not your enemy or your specimen. I am a being who loves and grieves and dreams, just as you do. I ask not for special treatment, but for the same chance at happiness that you give your own children. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Commander Helena Cross stood, not as Jace's mother, but as the station's military commander. The evidence is clear, she said formally. Under Colonial Treaty 847, Rena of the Telasari people is granted refugee status and full protection under colonial law. The transfer order is rescinded. The assembly hall exploded in applause, and Jace felt tears streaming down his face as Rena reached for his hand. We did it, he whispered. No, she corrected, squeezing his fingers. You did it. You found your voice. 6 months later, Jace stood in the newly constructed Cultural Exchange Center, watching Rena lead a group of young colonists through basic Telasari language lessons. The hover rig had been upgraded with her own design improvements, and she moved through the space with graceful confidence. Their relationship had evolved beyond the desperate intensity of those early days into something deeper and more sustainable. They were partners now in the truest sense, working together to establish protocols for contact with other species, bridging the gap between human and alien understanding. Ready for the ceremony? Rena asked, gliding up beside him. Today marked the official establishment of the Interspecies Relations Department, with both of them as founding members. Ready, Jace said, taking her hand. Outside the center's windows, the stars beckoned with infinite possibility. They had found each other in isolation and grown strong together. Now they would face whatever the universe brought their way, two souls who had learned that love really could bridge any distance, overcome any difference, and transform even the loneliest hearts into something brave and beautiful. The future stretched before them like an endless ocean, and they dove in together.